This session is all about what is a security program and quick tips to prove it. I'm Mike Gentili. And the big thing is, even as you're looking at this, you might say, oh, well, I know what a security program is, or someone else knows what a security program is. And the key is, the big thing to really understand is that there's lots of definitions floating around what a security program actually is. And that's one of the biggest things that you can do in your security program effort, is to strictly define what your effort is so that people understand and have context when you have conversations about it. So with that being said, let's get into the functional definition as well as some of the definitions that we apply to security, and use that to get into some tips to overall then go ahead and fix some issues associated with it. So what we're going to cover today is, what is this information security program? Some key security program functions. So basically, what is a healthy security program? That's really critical to being able to understand how you can particularly fix one. And then we're going to establish a starting point. So if your program is going right now, obviously if you're at this session, you're perhaps looking at what are some things that you could be doing in order to start moving your program forward. And so we're going to cover some of those tactical things coming out of the session as well. I normally let these things go open. You can raise your hand if you have a question. We're definitely in a 30-minute session for today, but I like to run an interactive session, so I'll try to intermingle them in if you get them. Go ahead and push it into the chat window and fire that question off, and then we'll go from there. All right, so let's get going here. So what is an information security program? So I always like to start, there might be a couple folks that are new into information security, and that's all good. What's the simple definition? And in fact, by simple, it's really, for the most part, what most organizations really still define it as. It's the group charged with protecting the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. And that's really the CIA triad, which is, as we all know, it's one of the foundations of security. But that's kind of the simple definition. And then adding on to that, it's usually managed by the Chief Information Security Officer. That's usually the primary group, although there's lots of names floating around for the leader. Chief Information Security Officer we talked about, Divisional Security Leader, I've seen Deputy, CISO, Director of Information Security, and the like. So with this definition, which is kind of the one that floats around out there, it's really hard to know what the heck the security program really does. And so that leads into some of the other things that we want to cover. And really what I created and the team has created over the years was really a working definition of the things that matter. So when I go and talk with an organization about their security effort, these are really the three areas that I focus on in terms of applying definition to a program, as well as understanding, kind of what are the gears associated with that program for going and being able to do stuff. So the first item is security program structure. So the structure of the security program is really how it's organized as a group within the organization. A lot of what we talked about in CISO Handbook was associated with a security program structure and how to build it. Is your security program a multi-group entity, meaning that you have a group of security leaders in maybe a specific business unit? Maybe you have one that serves the entire organization. Maybe you don't even have really a security program. You have a cross-matrix effort where just within your information technology organization, there's a security program that lives. There's really no wrong structure that can be in place, but it's a great way to start applying definition to your program. Some other considerations associated with this stratification: is it a multi-program or single program? We talked about that one. Operational or non-operational, so that's a big one. So is it something where you guys actually manage the security infrastructure in the environment, or is the security program one that is non-operational? Maybe you're just going and producing different things associated with guidance. Maybe you're just managing standards for the organization. The other item is associated with what we call the security pipeline. So the security pipeline is where your security program interacts with security events, really. So you can be architectural, before something's built or put into production in your environment. You can be operational. We talked a little bit about that one. As things happen in the environment, you're actually impacting or influencing change, or compliance-based. And Compliance-based is really after the fact. You're performing an audit on the environment as you go. You can perform as a security program in one of these areas. You can perform in all of these areas or pieces of them as a program, and none are necessarily wrong. What I would advise, though, is to really take a look at your program and see, where are you guys participating today and where do you want to be? I often see when I talk with a lot of folks that they say, oh yeah, we want to be architecture, we want to get things before they go into the environment. But then the roles and responsibilities associated with their program are all compliance based. So it doesn't work, but that's the security pipeline. Within the program, there's also the included roles for the organization, as well as the processes that exist. So roles would be security analysts, security engineers, security architects, and it really should also align to that pipeline. Ongoing from that, what processes exist? Do you have a risk management process? Do you have a vulnerability management process? What processes exist within your environment that are guiding what your program actually does? Moving forward from there, the other item that I think right now many organizations are struggling with the most, it's one of the biggest things that I think they really need, and it's kind of really a new discipline, is security architecture. So I'm of the belief that, and this is an opinion, that just about every security program should have a security architecture component within it and have that program structure designed. In fact, a lot of the rollouts that we're doing with building programs, we're pretty much almost always recommending that. It's a very new space. So what is security architecture? So security architecture is the implementation and management of preventative safeguards, implementation and management of detective safeguards. So preventative safeguards being things that can prevent bad stuff from happening in your environment, detective safeguards being things that can detect things within your environment. The key in all of this, though, is that you might not be an operational security program. And I get that from people sometimes, hey, well, we don't manage any of the actual security infrastructure that's done within IT. And that's great. What's most important as a security architecture function is the understanding of the effectiveness or management of those safeguards in your environment. But more importantly, how do those safeguards work off of each other in order to help either prevent or detect events happening within your environment? And so that piece, a lot of security programs out there do this piece, and some may define it as a security architecture, some may not. But I think it's a very important component to defining what your program should be. The third thing that any security program really should hit, and we're going to spend a lot of time here, is the functional capability of the security program. And whether your program is ISO certified, whether you're in healthcare and you're aligning to HIPAA and NIST-based standards, or you're now in the finance organization and you're working with all the FFIEC guidance, or now FINRA guidance that's coming down, whatever you use for your program, a healthy security program does 4 things. The first thing that it does is that it needs to set a benchmark for security. And I think sometimes people get confused on this item because they think, hey, we have security policies for the environment and that's kind of it. And sometimes they'll get lost on whether you should have 3-character passwords in your environment or 5-character passwords in your environment. And what I tell a lot of people a lot of times is that it's your job to set and establish that benchmark is the most important thing, so that people know whether you should have 3-character passwords or 6-character passwords. I think sometimes people get lost in the fight and not as much on the primary function of a security program, which is whatever it is, you want to be DoD level of specificity on your standards, that's great. It's the job of the program to define that benchmark for the environment and to really make that known to the environment, and whatever that may be. And that's across the security policies, the standards, any program documents, as well as any processes that exist in the environment. And that means things like, yeah, we do risk management, but not having that risk management process actually documented, you're not benchmarking security, in my opinion, if you don't have that piece in there, because the environment doesn't know what your risk management program is, and they also usually don't know how to interact with you. The next primary component is the ability to measure against that benchmark on a repeatable basis. And that's generally done through the risk management processes. And what's important here is not that you just measure in one place, but that you can measure across the organization, and as well as from the top of the organization all the way to the bottom. So it's not just one enterprise assessment or something like that. It's the measuring on projects, measuring in third parties, measuring across business units, all of those elements. And the most important piece is that you're able to do that on a repeatable basis, but also that you have the resources to do it. So one piece is, yeah, we have a risk management program and we've defined where we want to measure risk. The next component is that, hey, do we have the resources to actually effectively do that? So sometimes people will have the best risk management program, but then they have one resource that's charged with doing all these assessments, and so it's not performing on a repeatable basis. The third key functional capability of a program is to enable management decisions. So it's the ability to take information from regular measurement against the benchmark and present that to management so that they can make informed decisions. Even if that decision, by the way, is to actively do nothing. And then the final element is associated with the ability to support the execution of those decisions once made. So basically, it might not be actually implementing those decisions. Maybe you don't do anything, but it might be just supporting the implementation of those decisions within your environment. So tangibly, what this looks like. So usually the benchmark capability looks like your security policies and standards and risk documentation. And by the way, if those don't reflect what your security program is doing, that's problematic, right? It's going to be really hard for everything else to work. The next component is usually out of your security risk management processes and program that exists in your environment and how that's implemented, as we talked about. The third component would be the governance roles and responsibilities and dashboards for presenting information based on those other activities to management so that they can make informed decisions. And then usually the execution of decisions is usually in some type of information security project management office or something like that. So when I talk a lot of times with managers or executives or boards in an organization, I'll ask them a lot and they'll always say, oh, well, we're not getting any good information from management. And what I then ask is, okay, so what is the risk management program and how is information funneling to you? And what is the benchmark for security? It's impossible for a program to give effective information to management or for management to get effective information without those other components in place. So it's impossible to make good decisions, essentially. And this is in my opinion, if you don't have those systems in place. You can do it on a one-time basis, and that's what I think a lot of organizations do, is they will perform an assessment. That becomes the benchmark that they use. Then performance of that assessment is their one-time risk management program. They'll present those one-time findings report to management so that management can make a decision about that test. That's the enabling management decision. And then they'll fix sometimes maybe that one thing. And that at least is some progress, which is why I think a lot of people do it, but it's not an effective system that we're talking about here. The other thing to note is what's most important is not that you have one of these pieces hit out of the park or all of these pieces hit out of the park. It's that you have these pieces in a system so that they work off of each other in a way that it actually creates a system. And that might be a very simple policy set and a very simple risk management element and a very simple reporting or data presentation view that goes to management so that they can make decisions, and then a tracking of how those decisions were executed once made. That is much healthier than a lot of programs out there, though, some that are ISO certified, maybe some spend millions upon millions on security, and they can't really show how they've made one effective decision. And I wouldn't say that that's the rarity. I would say that that's probably 90 to 95% of programs, and I've probably personally been in, over the last 2-3 years, more than 150 independent organizations that are doing some type of security program of some fashion. So that's not necessarily a good statistic, But I would say that that statistic correlates with all the breaches, all the stuff that we're seeing there out in the news. And many of the reasons why I'm doing these sessions and really what we're trying to do with giving this stuff out is because I think that having a healthy security program is the best way to fix that. So let's get into some fixing points. So the biggest thing to come out of this session is make sure that you understand the functional health and start looking at your program from a functional perspective. But what are some other specific things you can do? Well, you can begin with a measurement of the items that we've talked about today. So look at your program charter document for your security program, and you might say, we don't have that. Well, that's your first real starting point, because that establishes that benchmark definition. You want to make sure that it reflects accurately what's going on in your environment, and it's effectively creating and presenting what your program is really doing. There's a lot of bogus ones out there, and that's gonna not really get the job done for what you need. So there's some measurement for that item. You wanna look at your existing benchmark. What security policies do you have in place? Are they appropriate? Do they make sense? Are they what's implemented? That type of stuff. Measurement capability. Do you have a risk management program? Is it properly resourced? Those types of things. Do you have the ability to support decisions? Is there proper governance? Is authority balanced with accountability and the like, and the ability to execute? So you might be saying, I can't remember all this stuff, Mike. Well, reach out to us. We have a progress pack that has a questionnaire template that we can give you these questions for what to ask, and we're more than happy to present that after this show. So, but you got to measure these things. And one of the things is you'll notice that the items that I'm talking about are not your common assessment that you'll see out there. Like if you did like a NIST-based straight up assessment or an ISO assessment, it's really focused on the elements of a security program in the context that we talked about today. And that's because we really think you could be 100% compliant to a framework and not have a functionally healthy security program. In fact, I think that's a lot of time what's going out there. What's the next thing you can do? And a lot of these things are designed as solutions and tools that you can use for actually moving a program forward with really just your own time or your team's time. So the other thing that I like to do is recommend to people to aggregate and centralize all your current findings. So it's not just that you have a report that was done in 1995 and it's over in the way. It's that you go actively collect all of the findings that exist in reports, even legacy ones, and even if they've been fixed, aggregate all those into a central database, which could be a spreadsheet, and have findings relate to recommendations, recommendations relate to projects, projects relate to programs of work, and programs relate to overall objectives for your program. Just getting that in one place is designed to really help you get some control. The other thing is sometimes people are really struggling with making progress, or they might be making progress and they're struggling with demonstrating that. And so it might be that you've completed 50% of what's going on in the findings reports that were done in the past. That's great. Organize that information and get it in a place and in a way so that you can then present that in a way to management. This is another process and suite of tools that we're more than happy to help you with. And it seems pretty simple, right? I mean, it's just like an easy thing, but it can be really effective and anyone can do it, and very rarely actually do people do it. I can tell you though, a lot of the people that are starting to do it are seeing the benefits of it, to just kind of getting some control to what's going on in the program. And then the final thing is create an initial dashboard. So again, following with the matrix of functions that we've been talking about today, you need to start presenting this information to management. And the other thing I tell people, sometimes people are really concerned with being able to get a decision. And what I tell people is if you organize all those findings, maybe you're not necessarily making traction, organizing them in a way that you give them to management, even if you know that management, hey, maybe they're not going to approve anything, they're not going to give us that funding or whatever. When you do that in this type of way, it is shifting accountability from your program to the board or to management. I like to go for the stars. I'll send this information way up, present it to them, give them information so that they can make informed decisions about what to do, and then let them go ahead and say no to it. That's great, but now it's in them. Those situations are a lot better when there is an issue, because it really shows that you've presented and given that information to management. And that's what it's all about, If you ask me, the primary function and the primary goal of a security program is to get information to the business so that they can make informed decisions. That's what it's all about. And if you have done that, it really doesn't matter what the decisions are that have made. It's simply your job to do that on a repeatable basis. So that's really the third thing. If you don't have a dashboard of any type that you're using, we again are going to give templates on all this stuff that you can work with that kind of supports this system that we're talking about. But if you do have one, then I think that that's a great thing for you as well. Just make sure you're using it. I'd also recommend that you have your communication system for how you present out these types of messages to management and get them out in a way so that they can actually defined with how you're doing it. We're gonna have more sessions and follow up on all the items that I talked about. I appreciate you guys for your time, and please feel free to reach out to any of us or me as well.